Incredible journey revealed. Millionaire Cowboy helps lost widow discover unexpected home and trek. Clara stood at the attic door, the faint beam of sunlight barely illuminating the dust motes swirling in the stagnant air. Heart pounding against her ribs, she hesitated. Each box she opened, filled with memories of her late husband, intensified the suffocating weight of grief. The lingering laughter, the shared dreams for their humble ranch, felt like echoes in a vast canyon of silence. How had she drifted here, standing amid relics of the past, grappling with the insurmountable task of keeping their life together? The bank's threats loomed over her, a constant reminder of the dwindling funds, the haunting fear of losing everything. She could almost hear the echo of her husband's voice, "We'll find a way, Clara." But those words felt like distant whispers in a gale. Would selling the ranch mean surrendering the last piece of him? She fought against the tide of despair rising in her throat. Resilience felt like a facade now. Each bill stacked on the table, each reminder of her widowhood, chipped away at her spirit. Rummaging through a box, her fingers brushed against something crisp and unexpected. A letter, yellowed with age. Unfolding it, Clara felt hope flicker to life as the words revealed an old family property back east. The very place her husband had often dreamt of reclaiming, a wild, untouched piece of land that held the promise of new beginnings. But the dream wavered beneath the crushing reality that financial burdens weighed heavier than illusory possibilities. Where would she find the strength to pursue this fleeting chance? Before she could spiral deeper into her doubt, a deep voice suddenly pierced the silence of her thoughts. It was Jake, the rugged millionaire cowboy, with a reputation built on grit and success, yet so often cloaked in isolation. News of her plight had spread like wildfire through the town, a widow wrestling with debt, desperate for help. Clara hadn't wanted to reach out, to feel vulnerable and exposed. But now the relentless press of her reality had brought him to her doorstep, an unexpected visit laden with questions. He stood there, arms crossed, a storm of conflict etched across his face. "I can help," he said, but the tone hung heavy in the air. An offer filled with the unspoken burdens of his own past. Clara wrestled with her instincts, unable to ignore how her pride clamored to refuse, and yet the rising panic within urged her to seize upon this lifeline. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. She unwrapped the letter from the box, opening her heart to the possibilities nestled within its yellowed pages. This property, it's a risky venture, but it could also be a fresh start. We could refurbish it, use what I know about the ranch, and merge it with your resources. She couldn't help the flicker of excitement that tinged her voice as plans unfurled in her mind, outlining an ambitious journey she never thought she'd undertake. Jake listened intently, his expression shifting from contemplation to that quiet intensity. "Are you ready for that? To uproot your life again so soon?" His question was sincere, and Clara realized it wasn't just an inquiry. It was a challenge, forcibly grounding her in this very moment. Could she truly step forward and embrace this change, or would the pull of her past realities shackle her victories before they could even begin? "I have to, at least try," she whispered, feeling the gravity of her words settle into her bones. "This ranch is my last connection to him, but it's also my chance to find out who I am without him." The admission tumbled from her lips, raw and unpolished, and with it came the realization that she was more than just a widow. She was an individual capable of survival and rebirth. Jake nodded, a smile breaking through the storm on his face. "Then we'll do this together, the two of us. You're stronger than you think, Clara." His belief in her sparked a kindling of confidence within, but with that warmth came a shadow. Would it be enough? As they mapped out their next steps, Clara felt the tremors of uncertainty, apprehension intertwined with a budding sense of empowerment. Would she be capable of this new life? Could they tear down the walls of grief and build something resilient? In that moment of collaborative hope, a thought struck Clara. The looming threats of the bank still hung overhead, like vultures waiting on the periphery. Wasn't it true that challenges often met one another with unexpected ferocity? With a renewed sense of purpose, she knew they had to confront what lay ahead, facing the not-so-distant fears of financial ruin and potential heartbreak. The journey they had embarked upon together was only just beginning. But with every step toward growth came the unsettling awareness that change invited chaos as much as it did hope. Something inside her echoed Steve's quiet determination. She would face any obstacles that arose on their path. But the question remained, was she truly ready for the storm that began churning beyond the horizon? Clara's mind raced as they strategically outlined the steps necessary to revive the ranch. Each point they discussed felt significant, filling voids in her plans and ambitions. She could sense the horizon stretching before them, but she remained shackled to her doubts. Could she truly embrace this partnership and step away from the safety of solitude? Days ahead loomed large with potential, yet Clara felt a familiar anxiety creeping in, whispering reminders of failures past and the societal expectations that equated success with an unyielding independence. With each thought, she felt an internal tug-of-war between her desire for growth and the fear of relinquishing control over her own life. Jake's voice broke through her thoughts. "I know we can secure funding if we present a solid plan. I have connections," he asserted, confidence radiating from him like an electric charge. Clara admired his determination, yet it brewed a swirl of tension inside her. This reliance on Jake felt precarious. She had always forged her own path, single-minded and resolute, and the notion of giving that up, even temporarily, resulted in a swirl of unease. "Jake, what if we run into more obstacles than we anticipate?" She knew the brutal reality they might face. Failure wasn't merely a possibility, it felt like an inevitable conclusion. The ranch's dilapidated state mirrored her own psyche. Remnants of what was once vibrant, now entangled in decay. His response, firm yet compassionate, steadied her. "Then we adapt. These challenges can reveal our strengths and teach us resilience. It's part of the journey." Clara was struck by the sincerity of his words. Each challenge could indeed serve as an opportunity, not only for the ranch, but for herself as well. There was a revelation simmering just beneath the surface. Perhaps the act of managing these difficulties together could fortify their trust, redefine her boundaries, and cultivate her capacity to lead. As they pooled their ideas, Clara found herself shifting her perspective. Each recommendation Jake made brought a sense of shared responsibility rather than blind reliance. This partnership was not a diminishing of her independence. It had the potential to unleash a new side of her, a leader who engaged with others to rise above adversity. Later that night, sitting in the stillness of her kitchen, Clara felt the weight of Steve's absence wrapping around her like a familiar yet heavy fog. The ranch was built on memories, echoes of laughter, triumphs, and heartaches that grounded her to a past she always carried with her. But now, envisioning the future, energy crackled between her and Jake. She would honor Steve's spirit by moving forward, building anew, rather than allowing grief to be her compass. With a steely resolve igniting within her, Clara opened her laptop to research funding options and renovation ideas. Hours stretched into the early morning, fueled by determination and tentative hope. She pored over every detail, crafting a vision plan that could reclaim the dreams once crushed by despair. The next morning, buoyed by her late-night efforts, Clara felt a shift in her optimism. She could weave her own narrative, balancing her independence with collaboration. She never imagined partnerships could catalyze personal development rather than hinder it. They discussed everything from grants to private investors, and much to Clara's surprise, ideas flowed seamlessly between them. The collaboration ignited something primal within her, and reminders of her long-dead dreams flickered to life. She found herself adapting Jake's suggestions, merging her vision with his perspective. But after their brainstorming session, a sudden wave of fear washed over her again, obscuring the clarity she had just begun to experience. She had spent so long depending solely on herself that the notion of shared desires felt foreign, like standing on the edge of a cliff. "I appreciate your help, Jake, but this all seems too good to be true. How do I know you're not just doing this to benefit yourself?" Jake's expression sobered. "I'm not here to take advantage, Clara. I genuinely believe in what we can accomplish together." He paused, letting his sincerity resonate. "You need to decide if you can trust me, not just for this project, but in the journey ahead." His words hit her like a ton of bricks. Trust was a big ask, one she wasn't sure she was ready to extend. But what if my trust leads to another betrayal? The question tumbled out, raw and unfiltered, revealing the ache of her past wounds. "Then we learn from it," he said simply, a calmness in his eyes. "But can't you see? Staying closed off may keep you safe, but it won't help you grow. It won't help the ranch." The weight of those words sat heavily in her chest. It was this very realization that tugged at her heartstrings. Jake was right, in a way she both dreaded and longed for. The fear of failing, of losing control, had constricted her for too long. In the tenure of grief and isolation, she had cultivated walls that no longer served her. But the shadows of self-doubt threatened to swallow her resolve again.
Could she truly let someone in without falling apart? As they began outlining actionable steps, Clara's heart pounded with a mix of hope and fear. With each new task, she detached a bit more from the shadows that had held her prisoner. Yet, somewhere deep inside, a disquiet stirred. Had Jake cracked a door just to mislead her? With each line drawn on their plans, she questioned the future now laid out before her. As their momentum built, uncertainty loomed like a distant storm, pregnant with danger. Clara clutched her notes tightly, the papers crinkling in her grip, an unconscious indication of her mounting apprehension. "Clara," Jake's voice penetrated her thoughts. "Are you with me?" In this moment of silent introspection, the choice felt monumental. Would she take the plunge? Embrace the possibility of betrayal to carve out her destiny? Or pull back into the confines of her solitude and risk everything slipping away again? As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting new light over the ranch, a resolve ignited within her. A moment hidden beneath layers of fear, yet glowing with potential.
The day ahead promised complications, but Clara felt herself on the brink of a revelation she hadn't anticipated. Perhaps this journey wasn't just about the ranch or partnerships. It was about confronting her own limits. "Let's do this," she finally replied, her voice firm, but as she spoke, doubt flickered again. Was she truly ready to embrace all that this decision might bring? Clara inhaled sharply, the decision hovering in the air like the warm breeze that tousled her hair. As she sat back at the table with Jake, she could feel the weight of those words embed themselves deeply. "Are you with me?" The sincerity in his voice transformed her uncertainty into an inner clash, part of her wanting to trust, while the other part warned against it fiercely. The morning unfolded as they settled into a systematic planning rhythm. Clara watched Jake's eyes light up with each detail shared, each strategy born out of their merged visions. His energy seemed to invigorate her once dormant aspirations. Ideas flowed, and Clara found herself brainstorming wildly beyond the limitations she had set for herself. What had felt like an outlandish hope was beginning to shape into a clearer path, alive with potential. She began to chart out their project as if it were her own heart beating, pulsing with new life. Still, self-doubt gnawed at her like a persistent insect. Thoughts raced through her mind, questioning each of Jake's suggestions. Was she doing enough? Did he see through her, to the cracks in her foundation built on years of solitude? With every winning idea, a new layer of fear unfurled. What if, when the dust settled, everything went wrong? "Clara, you don't seem all in," Jake's voice sliced through her spiraling thoughts. "You have valuable instincts. You just need to trust them." She knew she was right, yet vulnerability felt like a trap door waiting to open beneath her feet. Doubt crept back in, convincing her she was destined to fail. Memories of past betrayals hung heavier than the paper cluttering the work table. She exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of history dragging her back. "Trusting you, it feels risky," she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. In that instant, her strength seemed to falter. "I've been disappointed before. How do I know this time will be different?" Clara's genuine inquiry hung in the air, heavy and pungent. "Because you're on the other side this time," Jake said, leaning closer. "You're stepping into the light, Clara.
You can't let old scars dictate your path. His words, while encouraging, also unearthed a profound sense of responsibility. She realized it wouldn't just be a test of trusting Jake. It was a trial by fire for her own ambitions and emotional resilience. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles whitening.
For the first time, Clara considered that perhaps the next step required not just faith in Jake, but also in herself. Wasn't this moment a deviation from her past choices? Choice had always hung over Clara like a cloud, dragging her towards the familiar shadows of fear and disappointment. As they fleshed out funding strategies, she began to let go, allowing herself to immerse in their collaboration fully. Each time Jake turned to her for input, clarity dawned like the sun breaking through the fog. She strung together ideas, acknowledging the capabilities she hadn't allowed herself to recognize before. This wasn't just about the ranch, it was about her reclaiming her life, a bold stance against the paralyzing grip of uncertainty. Just then, a commotion outside the barn cut through her epiphany like thunder. Clara turned to see a group of locals approaching, their expressions curious, skepticism mingling with cautious hope. They hadn't seen her for a long time, not since the tragedy that turned her world upside down. Without realizing it, the very soil beneath her feet began to feel foreign again, like a harsh reminder of her past. "Clara?" one voice called out, and her stomach twisted, a familiar pang of anxiety. Would they come to ask for help, or had they come to judge? The moment held deep implication, a test of not just her plans, but of the growing vestiges of trust she'd cultivated with Jake. Would she succumb to the need for approval, or stand firm in her new-found resolve? As Clara squared her shoulders to face the approaching crowd, the stirrings of an unshakable determination surged within her. In that moment, the very foundations of her journey were put to the test. Would she allow fear to dictate her decisions again, or would she step forward into the light this time, ready to fight for her dreams come what may? As the first question was posed, Clara's heart raced. The stakes felt higher than ever. Would her voice carry the strength she felt clashing within her, or would she falter before the people who had long ago turned away from her? Clara's chest tightened as familiar faces emerged from the shadows of her memory. They were a reminder of days gone by, days colored by loss and silence, filled with voices that had turned away from her after the tragedy. She instinctively stepped back, her fingers clenching around the edge of the table, grounding herself against the surge of emotions rising within her. "Clara, are you coming back to the ranch?" The question came from a woman named Mary, who had been her childhood neighbor, now a ghost from the past. The innocent inquiry hung in the air like a question mark made of lead, promising to pull her under. She cleared her throat, preparing to respond, but no words emerged. The weight of their hopeful gazes bore into her. They expected answers, reassurance that she was still part of their world. And yet, here she was, teetering on the brink of a brand new adventure that felt precarious and raw. "Yeah, I'm working on something," Clara finally managed, her voice trembling but defiant. The project with Jake was not just about the ranch. It was about reclaiming her narrative, taking ownership of her life again.
Yet facing these familiar faces threatened to reverse her fragile progress. The murmurs of the crowd grew as the locals absorbed Clara's response. Skepticism mixed with curiosity painted their expressions. Inside, she felt the tension coil tighter, the apprehension that she might not be good enough, that they might reject her once again. "Are you sure it's a good idea after everything?" Another voice chimed in, a hint of doubt laced in it. As if questioning her capabilities wasn't enough, the group nodded collectively as this unrelenting uncertainty washed over her like an icy tide. In that instant, memories of past failures grasped her, squeezing her resolve. Clara had spent weeks hidden behind walls of her own making, retreating from outside judgment. Now, hearing the whispers and doubts almost swallowed her whole. Jake's encouraging presence felt distant as Clara straightened her spine, battling the force that urged her to retreat. Her heart raced with the need to be seen beyond their judgments. "I've got this," she whispered to herself, and a flicker of determination ignited deep within her. "Listen," she said, her voice steady now. "I know I've made mistakes, but I'm ready to work on my future. I'm restructuring this ranch to thrive again, so it doesn't just sit empty. We can rebuild together, but I need your support." A hush fell over the crowd. They met her gaze tentatively. Clara felt her stomach roll with the risk of vulnerability. She was baring herself to those who had once looked upon her with pity, yet it also felt liberating. Jake's hand rested on her back, solid and grounding. She caught his eyes, filled with respect and admiration, and it fueled her resolve even further. But as she stood before the locals, uncertainty made an unwelcome visit again. Had she spoken too boldly? Did she expose herself to scorn? Then Mary spoke again, her voice softer this time. "We just want to see you okay, Clara. We all miss the way things used to be." The tone was sympathetic, a glimmer of understanding piercing through the air thick with apprehensions. In that moment, Clara realized that their struggle mirrored her own. She wasn't alone. There was a collective desire for healing that perhaps even extended beyond her own narrative. A bond severed, but not entirely broken, waiting for someone to take the first step forward. "Let's work together then," Clara suggested, surprising herself. "I could use your input on the project. We can make this place a hub again. Let's bring back what once made this community special."
But the haunting presence of Sam lingered like a storm cloud. She attempted to shift her focus from him, but his immovable stance drew her like a magnet. What did he want? Why now, after all this time? A decision brewed inside her. With an exhale, Clara turned to face him directly. "We can't just let the ranch deteriorate," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "It needs to become something again. We can't afford for the past to keep winning." The eyes of the community shifted briefly back to Sam, whose expression remained unreadable. Clara held her ground, her heart racing with both defiance and dread. "Clara," Sam finally spoke, his voice a mixture of regret and challenge. "You think you can just come back and fix everything? You think this is as simple as just wanting it to be better? You don't know what you're up against." Each word sliced through the air, igniting tension in the circle.
Clara's stomach twisted as all eyes turned toward her, waiting for a response. Did he really believe she could be intimidated back into silence? Her breath steadied, bolstered by the weight of the crowd. "I'll find a way, Sam. I owe it to the ranch, and I owe it to myself to try. You may not believe in me, but I will not let your doubts dictate my journey any longer." For the first time, Clara's voice resonated with resolve, lifting her spirit above the clutches of fear. She realized then that confronting Sam was as much a part of her reclaiming herself as the ranch was. His skepticism did not define her path. She was ready to carve it out, regardless of his belief in it. As the silence stretched, she felt the room shift, the dynamic subtly altering with her newfound assertiveness spilling over into her surroundings. But beneath this wave of empowerment lay the unsettling realization that her past was still very much of her present. Feeling eyes lingering, she turned one last time to Sam. There was a flicker of something in his gaze, a mixture of surprise and, perhaps, a hint of respect. But before she could interpret it, he spoke once more, cold and cutting. "I'll be watching, but I can't promise it'll end well." The weight of his words hung in the air long after he walked away. Clara's heart raced. She didn't want to dwell on the doubt he'd cast. Instead, she focused on the empowered voices rallying around her, and the plan spreading like ripples in water reflected her growing resolve. As ideas began to flow, Clara silently vowed to confront whatever obstacles lay ahead. Except now they stood on the horizon of a better future. What remained was the challenge of mending her relationship with Sam. With renewed determination coursing through her, Clara gathered her thoughts, ready to lead her new allies into this brave new chapter. But the lingering shadows of doubt remained, and she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Sam's return was only the first of many challenges on her path. What awaited her as she ventured further into this endeavor? Would she be prepared to face the ghosts of her past head-on, or would they emerge from the shadows to derail everything she had begun to rebuild? Clara's mind raced as she stepped away from the meeting, her heart still echoing with the challenge Sam had thrown at her. The community's vibrance faded behind her as she walked into the stillness of the ranch yard. The sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the landscape in shades of orange and violet, yet her mind was clouded with doubt. How could she tackle the immense tasks ahead of her when shadows of her past still loom? She leaned against the weathered fence, its roughness grounding her. The ranch was not just land and livestock. It was a palpable part of her identity, stained with memories, yet brimming with potential. Clara knew she needed to convert the murk of her past into fuel for the future. But how? The night air grew cool as she took a deep breath. She began brainstorming ideas, mentally sketching a plan to turn the ranch into a community hub, a sanctuary where all could learn, develop, and share their stories. Yet glimmers of fear surfaced. Would anyone take her seriously? Could she trust herself to be the leader they needed? With her pulse steadying, Clara imagined the workshops she could host, Courses on sustainable agriculture, herbal remedies, animal husbandry. The knowledge swirled excitingly in her head. She envisioned bringing seasoned ranchers in to share techniques, nurturing a shared sense of learning and growth. These thoughts breathed confidence into her weary spirit. But then Sam's words echoed, "You don't know what you're up against." Did she? Did she have enough experience, enough strength to battle the devastation that lay behind her? She grimaced, allowing doubt to tighten her throat momentarily. She couldn't shed her insecurities as easily as she could shed her past. Turning back to the ranch house, she paused to observe. Rows of dilapidated barns stood like sentinels against the night sky. They echoed stories of failures and triumphs, and were reminders of what she had lost. But each structure also harbored dreams, her dreams, and perhaps dreams of others who could join her. Clara sought comfort in her determination. Pulling out her phone, she scrolled through her contacts, searching for those who had once found solace in the ranch. Old friends, mentors, people who might offer not just expertise, but emotional support as she embarked on this steep incline of renewal. Her fingers hovered over a name before she hesitated. She felt a sudden jolt, conjuring memories of laughter intertwined with shared frustrations. Could she reach out after so long? Before she could second-guess herself, Clara pressed call and listened to the ringing voice on the other end.
Each conversation birthed more ideas, and slowly she scribbled notes, carving visions for workshops and community gatherings. Clara found herself smiling as enthusiasm coursed through her, combating the lingering shadows of Sam's certainty. But as she hung up, a surreal realization settled in her gut. The enthusiasm on the other end, those voices rekindled, didn't remove the skeptical shadow that followed her. The truth remained. She was still fundamentally alone in this journey, navigating a landscape distorted by past mistakes and uncertainties. In the days to come, Clara threw herself into preparations, mapping out potential learning spaces, researching agricultural techniques, and extending invitations to local experts. Every challenge sharpened her focus, yet the question of Sam's earlier warning lingered ominously. The clock ticked down toward the first meeting she had called, building anticipation like a pressure cooker. Yet Clara couldn't shake the feeling that Sam's skepticism wouldn't be the only obstacle she faced. Shifting her gaze to the horizon that now held the promise of dawn, she thought about what she still had to prove, not only to others, but to herself. Would she find the strength to rise above it all and transform her vision into a reality? Or would her past overshadow her aspirations yet again? Clara stepped back into the house, ready to face whatever the next days would bring, fortified by her fledgling purpose, but aware of the storm clouds yet to gather. And just as a final challenge burst forth in her mind, she pondered the chilling possibility. What if the most formidable challenge was never around her at all? What if it lay hidden within? Clara awoke the next morning to a crisp clarity that felt surreal, an unexpected benefit from the anxious rigidity that had gripped her the night before. She slipped into her worn boots, their familiar comfort evoking a sense of purpose. Today marked the first meeting of her workshop initiative, a reality that felt simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. The ranch, bathed in the glow of the morning sun, seemed alive.
Clara stood outside, inhaling the earthy scents mingling with the sweetness of impending growth. She had dedicated nights planning every detail, but doubts taunted her relentlessly. Was she ready to lead? What if the people she'd invited saw her as an amateur, a mere dreamer, chasing a fantasy that would fade like the morning mist? Determined not to linger in self-doubt, Clara forced herself into action. She went to the barn, where she had envisioned hosting the first workshop. Dust motes danced lazily in the sunlight, streaming through warped windows, illuminating the aging wooden beams. With a few tables arranged and chairs borrowed from the house, she hoped to create a space that felt warm and inviting, a sanctuary for ideas to sprout. As the clock crept closer to the meeting time, Clara's pulse quickened.
Here's the meeting time. Clara's pulse quickened. She busied herself with minor adjustments, straightening a misplaced chair, fluffing cushions. Each small action anchored her tenuous thoughts, though shadows of uncertainty slipped through. She caught her reflection in a barn window and forced a smile, hoping it would inspire more than just herself. But deep within, she questioned whether her enthusiasm could withstand the scrutiny about to unfold. Minutes ticked by, each second morphing into eternity. And then, like droplets finding their rhythm in a downpour, faces began to appear. Acquaintances, former friends, and even those she barely knew. Their expressions varied from mild curiosity to open skepticism. Clara felt the weight of each individual gaze. What were they expecting from this? A sign of change, or merely a reflection of their own doubts? As the group settled in, Clara's voice quivered as she welcomed everyone, explaining her vision for the workshops. She felt an ember of connection glowing within the crowd, but it was overshadowed by the memories of past failures. The voices of her childhood echoed in the back of her mind, reminiscent of times when she wished to share her thoughts only to be met with ridicule or indifference. Summoning her courage from deep within, Clara decided to express her primary intention: to create a space where vulnerability was not only welcomed but embraced. The room fell into an uneasy silence, as though everyone was weighing their decision to engage. She could almost feel the collective breath held, the tension thick enough to slice. Then she shifted her approach, introducing a simple icebreaker that involved sharing a lesson learned from failure, something that resonated with her own story. Slowly, one by one, participants began to let down their defenses. Laughter mingled with sighs, revealing layers of human experience, struggles and aspirations that mirrored her own. As the stories unfolded, Clara recognized something profound emerging among them. She could see glimpses of a newfound camaraderie forming. It wasn't just the space she hoped to cultivate. It was the realization that by sharing their vulnerabilities, they were inadvertently weaving a fabric of connection, something she thought she could never create again. But just as the energy in the room peaked with collective warmth, Clara's heart sank. Sam's earlier words reverberated, questioning her ability. "You're still not a leader." The quiet of the barn felt deafening, a roaring reminder of potential failure. Doubt clawed at her thoughts, and she almost faltered in front of them. But something held her in place. She realized that the shadow of that doubt didn't have to bind her. It could also propel her forward. She took a deep breath, summoning her resolve.
"Let's work through those insecurities together," she proposed. "We are here to learn from each other." As participants nodded affirmatively, Clara felt a surge of purpose.
This community wasn't just a gathering. It was a foundation she could build upon, drawing strength from the very vulnerabilities she feared would unravel her. But then disturbing thoughts crept back into her mind as she caught Sam's figure in the doorway, watching, evaluative. What if her efforts weren't enough, regardless of the progress others were making? The meeting, while promising, felt like an illusion of stability against the storm within. In that moment, Clara faced agonizing clarity. Some battles were external, but the most intricate ones were waged in the silence of one's own mind. If she was to embrace this transformation, she would need to confront those shadows embodied in Sam's skepticism and her own vulnerabilities head on. "All right," she whispered to herself, feeling the tension clutch at her. "The deeper challenge is ahead." And with that, Clara was propelled into a realization that these initiatives, these small acts of courage, weren't just about the ranch or the community they could forge. They were the steps needed to confront her truth, one vulnerable conversation at a time. As she gathered everyone's stories, she realized the collective strength present could lead her forward. Yet, beyond the horizon loomed the unsettling question: was her journey merely beginning, or were the real trials yet to unfold? Clara stood at the edge of the ranch, the sunset casting long shadows on the land that had once felt like a suffocating prison, but now radiated with promise. Each depth of color in the sky felt like a reflection of her own transformation. Over the past weeks, as the community began to gather in her barn, an undeniable shift had taken place. She had once been ruled by fear, tightly wrapped in the suffocating embrace of loss and grief. But now the light of hope flickered brightly within her. The workshops had blossomed beyond her expectations. Attendees didn't just come for knowledge. They came for stories, shared struggles, and collaborative dreams. Clara observed their interactions with a sense of pride swelling in her heart. She had built a network of support that pulsated with determination and growth. The shared laughter and brainstorming sessions echoed through the walls, and the barn transformed into a haven for resilience. Yet, even amidst this blooming community, Clara felt the pull of Sam's skepticism. He had haunted her thoughts longer than she had dared to admit, his chilling observations a constant reminder of her precarious footing. As doubts crept in, so did the realization of her need to confront him. It wasn't merely about proving him wrong. It was about affirming her own journey and the progress she had made. Taking a deep breath, Clara resolved to invite Sam to the workshop. She needed him to see the woman she had become, not the fearful widow she remembered, but someone ready to fight for her dreams. "All right," she whispered to herself, feeling the tension clutch at her. "The deeper challenge is ahead." And with that,
Clara was propelled into a realization that these initiatives, these small acts of courage, weren't just about the ranch or the community they could forge. They were the steps needed to confront her truth, one vulnerable conversation at a time. As she gathered everyone's stories, she realized the collective strength present could lead her forward. Yet, beyond the horizon loomed the unsettling question: was her journey merely beginning, or were the real trials yet to unfold?
With each passing day, attention d'Entrieres maintained a simmering intensity, and she felt it was time to address the undertow of their shared history. When she reached out, Sam's response was cooler than she had hoped. Despite his hesitation, he showed up to the next workshop, standing against the back wall, arms crossed, uncertain. Clara felt a knot tighten in her stomach, but she steeled herself, acknowledging him in her opening remarks. "Thank you for coming, Sam. I know this might be difficult for you, but I'm determined to show that things can be different." Her voice trembled with purpose, emotion surfacing as she forced out the words she had rehearsed in her mind. The workshop progressed with energy and involvement, but Clara's focus remained split. Was Sam truly open to change, or was he there to scrutinize her every move? As the attendees began to share their stories, she spotted him shifting, caught in the wake of collective vulnerability that enveloped the room. Finally, Clara addressed him directly. "Sam, I know our history is complicated, but we both hold pieces of what this ranch represents. This isn't just about the land, it's about healing for ourselves and for our community. We cannot let our past mistakes define our future endeavors." In that moment, she felt a shift. The crowd turned their gaze toward Sam, who for the first time appeared contemplative rather than judgmental. Perhaps at that moment they all connected. He was part of her story, but he no longer dictated her narrative. His eyes softened slightly, and Clara sensed the walls he had built beginning to tremble. "Maybe you're right," Sam replied, his voice low. "But this is not easy for me, Clara. Watching you take this on, I've seen how easily everything can crumble." The honesty softened the tension and shifted her perception of him. He wasn't just a skeptic, he was a man plagued by his own past. "Change is difficult for all of us," Clara replied, her confidence rising in tandem with his vulnerability. "But I'm willing to face it. You taught me the importance of standing strong, and maybe together we can turn this ranch into something that reflects growth." The workshop buzzed with renewed energy at their exchange, filling the room with the potential of collaboration rather than competition. Clara turned back to her audience, fueled by the realization that her journey had indeed transformed those around her. She was not merely reclaiming her identity, she was redefining it into something powerful. Weeks turned into months, and the once decaying ranch began to bloom anew, a reflection of their collective aspirations. Clara had evolved from a widow lost in grief to a leader guiding the way forward, not just for herself, but for everyone who had become part of this rebirth. The day came for Clara to unveil the craft fair.
A goal that had started as a small thought during a workshop and had burgeoned into a community event.
As the sun rose on that pivotal day, Clara looked around at the thriving businesses taking root around the ranch and felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. Each tent represented someone's dream, their trust in her vision. In that moment, standing amid laughter and vibrant colors, she realized she had conquered her demons. The fear that once paralyzed her had broken away, leaving only the solid foundation of respect forged within her community. She had achieved what she once thought unattainable: authentic belonging and a sense of purpose anchored in resilience. "Clara," Jake called her from a distant booth, his eyes glinting with admiration. Clara smiled, warmth blooming in her chest, fully aware of the journey they had undertaken together. She had demonstrated growth in ways she had never expected, allowing herself to lean on others while uplifting them simultaneously. In this newfound solidarity, she was solidified, no longer defined by her past, but by the legacy she was forging for herself and the ranch. As attendees poured in, she felt a surge of contentment wash over her. She had gone from the depths of despair to a place of collaboration and community again. Each workshop conversation, and the revitalization of the ranch built a movement, not just of land, but of heart. Clara took a moment to reflect, embracing the knowledge that her journey was ongoing. Before the sun dipped below the horizon that day, every ounce of her effort felt validated, solidified in the smiles and stories of those around her. All at once, Clara understood. She had not only carved out a space for healing, but transformed her destiny. With unfaltering confidence, she stepped into her future, knowing that together they could weather any storm. And in that realization, she found her true home again, crafted not just by bricks and soil, but by trust, resilience, and an invincible spirit of community. Now is the moment you need to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Clara's incredible journey. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.